Welcome. Welcome to another installment of AI Giants. Today we have a great host, a great guest with us today from Augment Code, Vinay Perneti, who's a VP of Engineer, where he builds AI coding tools for developers working in large, complex code bases. Previously, he led up also observability platforms at Meta. Hi, Vinay.
Hi, Jaime. Happy to be here.
Welcome. So as always, as a start, 2 points, we're going to launch a poll very soon with a number of questions just to get your engagement. And that should start now. And also a reminder to post any questions that you want, either in the chat in LinkedIn or through our Q&A feature. So let's get started and jump right in. Vinay, you've been working in Augment Code for about a year now. What do you find most surprising since you joined?
Um, yeah, I think it's almost been a year and a half. And when I talk to folks, candidates talking to Augment, one of the things I often say is a year and a half in Augment and AI for code feels like 10 years in any other era, right? Because the rate of change is so high. Um, the thing that to me, before this I was at Meta, and Meta is known for moving fast and trying to they built it into the culture. Like the culture is all about adapting to change and moving fast. But at Augment and in the AI for code space in general, the rate of change has been nothing like unlike anything I've seen. So that's been the I would say both challenging and the most exciting part of being here.
Excellent. Well, as we think about Augment Code, one of the key differentiating factors, which I personally find one of the most important ones in the industry, is context management and the ability to support large code bases. So these are quite critical. How do you plan to stay ahead of this? Like, I think exploring why this was important is interesting, but also how do you think about the future and staying and planning to stay ahead?
Yeah, I think I'll take a step back, right? So when Augment was first founded, the thesis for the company, the founders started with this understanding that a lot of the value creation happens in teams of developers, right? And when teams of developers are working on a common shared code base together, it often grows into a place where it's large, messy, hard to navigate. I think that's the thesis. So how is Augment different? If you think about the other coding assistants out there, let's just take Cloud Code as an example. If you're trying to do something with Cloud Code, often the way it discovers context is by grep and then doing markdown files. Whereas Augment, we've taken a fundamentally different approach from the beginning. So the first step when you're working with Augment is we ingest your entire code base and we create embeddings for the entire code base. And we put that in a vector database that we implemented internally, super fast, very low latency. And we stay in sync with the code base in the order of milliseconds, right? So our backend always has the latest semantic understanding of your entire code base. That's where context comes in. So when I think about context, I think we think about it in almost three buckets now. The first bucket I would say is this is very much research oriented. What are we doing to continuously push the envelope so that we have the best context engine? This is more on the how we create embeddings and also how we do retrieval, right? So there's a lot of model training, fine tuning, post training with more data. And then training them in pairs so that we know that the embeddings that are generated produce the highest quality when you're doing retrieval. That's one focus area. There's another focus area which is all about expanding the sources of context, right? So we're always looking to see what new sources of context can we add to our context engine so that the quality of the agent is consistently getting better. So we recently added PR history into our code base context. And the thinking there was, imagine if there's a pattern of like adding a feature flag, right? Typically adding a feature flag touches like 20 different places in your code base.
Right.
If you're a new developer trying to add a new feature flag, if your agent has a prior pull request that shows all the call sites, then you're able to the quality of the agent is much higher. That's what we've seen in our internal benchmarks. So things like that. So we're always looking to see what additional context we could be adding. So the quality of the agent is better. That's a second bucket. The third bucket, I'm sort of maybe announcing this a little bit early.
Let's go.
One consistent thing that we've been hearing from folks is, hey, the context engine is something that we really value. Can we get it as an API? So some of our customers are actually trying to build their own internal context engine equivalent. And coming, like, this is a pull from our customers. So we're actively working on a product that would be context as an API, so context as a service, where developers can just with an API call add in more context and then retrieve against it. So that's something I'm super excited about.
Fascinating. And just to, because there's many companies might be interested actually to do that. Particularly, are there particularly use cases on using that API to build things internally as a company?
I mean, two use cases, right? So let's just take an example where if in your CI/CD pipeline, as an example, you're trying to do test triage, right? So test failures and test triage. Often there's company-specific information that you may want to include as context for the agent, so that as it's doing triage, like test triage, the output is much higher quality. So some companies today are trying to build this like runbooks and playbooks. They're trying to like build up their own solutions. And the idea with the context service as an API is you can just, with an API, just add context or remove context, and all of that is available to the agent directly, right? That's one pocket of examples. There's a completely, I mean, this is sort of almost like a developer tool. It's a tool to build other products on top of. So we actually don't know how this might get used. I can see companies, right? Like, let's say I'm building a legal agent, and in the legal domain, there's a ton of documents that you have to sift through. Do I go get off-the-shelf RAG system that doesn't do that great, or I have access to the best context engine through just an API, add all the documents there, retrieve against that through natural language, and then off I go. So I think that's kind of the direction that we are thinking of taking. So both in the SDLC, I think there's a lot of applications there, but you can also be building products on top of this API where you're getting access to the best context engine there is today. So that's the angle that we're pursuing.
Fascinating. Well, we heard it here first. Excellent. One of the things, obviously, Augment is operating in one of the most exciting markets, and I think it's one of the pivotal companies that are shaping the way, particularly when we think about larger code bases. What do you reckon has been most challenging and most rewarding so far in building and helping the company build these products?
I think when I think about challenges, right, the word challenge, I think, can be seen through a positive lens or a negative lens. And when I look at this through the lens of startups, there's many challenges that you look forward to, right? Nobody joins a startup expecting to be a smooth ride. And if they are, I think then they're probably in for a surprise. So from that dimension, I kind of knew what I was getting myself into when I was looking at like joining Augment from Meta. The thing that's been very interesting, I kind of mentioned this earlier, is it's one thing to be doing a startup, but it's a whole different thing to be doing a startup at a time period where the industry and just the rate of change is unlike anything we've seen, right? So it's November right now. I think about 14 months ago or 15 months ago is when like Sonnet 3.5 started becoming more and more common, and just the step function change in what the capabilities of the models are, it changes every 3 to 4 months, right? Every three to 4 months, it's a new thing, like building block, new capability that you're dealing with. So from a challenge point of view, I would say, I think the muscle that's been tested the most and stressed the most and flexed the most is ability to adapt to change, right? Like it's almost like it's not change management anymore, it's change fitness, right? Like how do you truly build the team, build the muscle in the company so that you're leaning into these moments as opposed to feeling surprised by these moments. So I think that's the thing that's most challenging, rewarding in sort of different dimensions. If you look at it from the rewarding side of the lens, I think folks that are not in the weeds underestimate like how different software engineering is going to be. Like software engineering as a craft, I think is going to be very, very different, right? Like the analogies that come to mind is like, imagine everybody was writing software in assembly and all of a sudden Python shows up and you can express what you're trying to do way quicker, much faster. What does software development look like in that world? I think it's unlike anything like in the previous world. So the rewarding part is actually building that with our customers, building that with folks on our Augment team, sort of seeing what that future looks like. That to me is super, super rewarding.
Without giving away any proprietary info, are you able to share the AI models that power Augment?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about sort of what powers Augment today, right? So there's when you think about Augment, there's when users are using Augment, there's a couple of different things they get from Augment. For folks that are in the IDE, they get code completions and next edit suggestions. That's one pocket of features. There are folks that are using an agent. They're getting there's a lot there, so I can unpack that in a bit. And then the folks that are using Augie, our CLI, outside of the interactive software development, what does it look like? From the point of models, there's a couple of classes of models. There's one class of models which we internally train, do post-training and fine-tuning on. It's all of our completions models. That's something that we develop completely in-house. There's a foundation, the context engine, there's a couple of models. Our embedding model and retrieval model are both something that we post-train internally with a lot of data. That is something also something that's internal. For the agent, we actually look at agent a little bit differently. I think for the best quality agent, I think you need two things. Intelligence and context, right? And you can also kind of think about it even in the anthropomorphizing AI a little bit. In the human world, right? If you think about software developers, there's the full-time employees and there's contractors. So you can sort of say contractors are just like borrowing intelligence, but they're missing context, right? So the full-time employees typically have both intelligence and context. Augment's goal is to, from a context point of view, that's where we bring in all of our best. And then for intelligence, we just go for the best models. So that's something where the approach we've taken is one where it's not like if you go to Augment, you're not going to see 20 models that users can choose from. Instead, you have 3 models, right? And that's because we are spending a lot of time internally to try to figure out, look, what is the most intelligent model that does the best with the context that we can provide? So that you're not having to, there's not like a choice paralysis that you're having to go through. Mm-hmm. It's just 3 models, like very, like the top of the line, high thinking model, middle of the road, gets most of the tasks done, super fast and low cost, right? So that's kind of the 3 tiers that we've chosen. So that's like the ensemble of multiple things coming together. And maybe to pop up one level, the philosophy is, look, let us do some of the, solve the hard problems of like what models make sense, what's the right thing, so that you can focus on your problems, right? Like when you're working on a task, you shouldn't be spending mental cycles on how do I get the best context? Am I tagging the right file? Oh, which model did I pick? Oh, did I get like, oh, I wish I.
It's the latest one because they change so frequently as well. Yeah, that's right.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Cool. Okay. So I had a chance to hear one of the interviews from Augment CEO. And one of the things that he was mentioning is that you guys were able to cut onboarding time for new engineers at Webflow by acting as a mentor 24/7. And I think that's a fascinating use case that I wasn't hearing before. What can you tell us about this onboarding use case, or if there's other use cases like this one where Augment really shines in getting engineering teams to work better?
Oh yeah, I mean, so code base understanding, and like it's incredible how much Augment understands your code base. I'll give you two examples. At Augment, I meet with folks as new folks are coming in, and I try to connect with them, say how are things going. One of my favorite questions to ask is like, how is Augie working out for you? How has it been different, right? I'll give you two examples. I think this is one of the engineers I was talking to, and they started about 6 weeks ago, and I was checking in with them, like, how are things going? They mentioned two things that really stood out for me. One is when you're joining a new company, you're often trying to find this balance of how much do I try to solve things on my own, and how much can I go bug my mentor or my peer? And there's always this balance of like, wait, I'm asking too many questions and taking up their time, right? Versus, oh, but I'm not asking enough, and therefore I'm not like onboarding fast enough. That's a tension every person goes through when they join a new company. They were mentioning that, with Augment, number one, they could ask all the stupid questions. I mean, I never think there's any question, no question is stupid, but there's a general hesitation to be asking questions. But with Augment, you can be asking all the questions. It gets you 80% of the way. Now, is this the source of truth that you should go anchor on? No, you should not, right? Because AI is only going to get you so far. But the beauty about this is when you go ask a question to someone on your team, the quality of the question is so much richer than, hey, tell me what this particular file is doing, right? Like, wait, why ask me that? Can you spend some time reading the file, right? So from that point of view, I think the richness of the questions are very, very different. The second thing is when you're actually working on tasks, there's always this starting problem, right? Like writers have this writer's block. I think when you're working on a brand new code base, you don't know where to start. Agents that deeply understand your code base can get you 80% of the way. So it truly accelerates learning, and it also allows you to get started quickly. So this engineer was saying, hey, in my previous company, their onboarding was about 4 to 5 months in a large code base, right? At Augment, in week 6, they've already put out a pretty complex code PR that touches like a wide range of the code base, right? So that's one example. Another example, this was super cool, I thought. Like we had someone join our Eng management team. In their first week, there was a new model that was going to be launched by one of our model providers. And then we really wanted to accelerate some of the testing. They're like, one of the ICs on the team jokingly said, hey, why don't you run the eval and then help us figure out where to go? And in week 1, they actually, with Augie's help, they figured out like how to run the eval, digest the results. And in week 2, we launched the model, right? Like that is unheard of. Like if you think about in the prior world, it's like, oh, how do I get the context? So I think it truly is a different world, I think, that we're entering. So those are some examples that really energize me.
That's really cool, and you can feel that energy from you talking about. That's really, really cool. One of the things that I routinely hear when we talk to companies adopting AI coding tools is how hard it is to, or how big of a challenge it is to enable and facilitate and get current teams that already have processes and other tools, particularly when we think about senior software engineering, to use AI coding tools. There seems to be some resistance in teams that already have their processes and been working for years, particularly in large code bases. How do you see this? Is this a challenge that you see frequently? The question is, how do we enable everyone to use AI coding tools in Augment?
This is a question that many leaders are sort of grappling with. I think a couple of thoughts on how I think about it. I think change is hard in general for humans, right? Like anytime you're trying to do something different than what you're already used to, it's difficult. The second thing I'll say is, if there's one thing that I think developers hate, is being told what to do, right? Like you can never go tell someone that you must use Vim as your IDE and there's no other choices for you. Like it's a sure shot way of getting a big backlash. I think there's a similar aspect that happens when you think about AI coding assistants. I think typically where Augment enters the picture is, a team is an eng leader has been brought on Cloud Code, or they have a cursor, and they're really good in for a variety of tasks. But maybe in the legacy parts of the code base, or if they have a repo that's large and messy, they're just not finding that their development teams are like embracing them sufficiently. And that's where I think, do you have the right tool for the job? It's one thing to say, I'm going to force you to go continue to use this. I think as leaders, one of the things you have to, the space is so early and it's changing so rapidly. How do you give the choice to your development team and have them choose? The best way as an eng leader for you to know if developers are finding value or not is just looking at adoption, right? No developer is going to use a tool that's not giving them value. And if they're not adopting it, I think it's worth asking, hey, is there a different tool that will get you to find more value in this, as opposed to being a top-down push for you must use this, right? So I think that's kind of how I see it differently. So I think I guess maybe I'll conclude that by saying, as an eng leader, if you are finding yourself asking the question, like, why is my team not adopting AI? I think rather than saying, what new mandate do I need to give, I would go bottom up and get curious about what are the challenges they're running into, what's holding them back, right? Assume good intent, and then see if like a different tool needs to be brought in to really help them sort of unlock their productivity. That's kind of how I see it.
In one of our previous sessions, we were exploring this topic of automation bias, in which as we work more with AI to produce software, we assume it to be correct more and more frequently, leading us to accept more and more frequently as well the suggestions, maybe with less review or less attention, and just click accept. You guys think about that at all? Is that a worry, like that we're leaning too heavily into the AI and not having as much ownership or perception of ownership of the code being produced?
Yeah, I mean, I would say this is a little bit more cultural than anything else. I think, and I think tooling can help too, right? Like, for example, when you think about the software development lifecycle today, right? Like, you have in a given team, you have folks typically working on some piece of the code base. They have multiple guardrails. There's unit tests, there's system tests, there's code review, and then there's end-to-end tests, right? And then there's post-launch, there's monitoring, and then like there's rollbacks. I think all of this exists for humans already. The question is, with AI in the mix, if you're producing more of this, how do you make sure that those systems are like set in a right place so that you can take the right corrective action? I think that's one. The second thing, I think something that we think about at Augment is like, look, AI is a tool, right? Ultimately, the person who's pushing the PR owns the code. So, use the tool however you want to accelerate whatever you're trying to do. But ultimately, the responsibility is still on the person that's putting that out.
Yeah. That makes sense. And I think that needs to be kind of like a disclaimer somewhere when you buy this type of AI coding solution. Still your code, it's still your responsibility. Cool. I want to talk about kind of upcoming features, and maybe we start with vision. Like, what do you see for Augment Code as we get into, obviously, as I imagine, roadmaps right now are not more than 6 months, maybe not even 3 months, because things they change so frequently. But what do you see, if you can kind of do a bit of futurology for Augment Code to become, and what do you see for as vision for the product?
Yeah, great question. On roadmap, I'll give you a story. So in 2025, we started the year by saying, this is the roadmap for the year. This is what we have in mind. Jan 25th, we threw the roadmap out the door, and we sort of like started building agents in the IDE.
Right.
So it's very true. I think gone are the days where you think your roadmap is a year plus. It's a lot more about so we think about in a quarter range, but the vision that we have is, I think, much more durable, right? So the vision, when we think about Augment, at Augment, it's about creating a platform that allows developers to automate all parts of the software development lifecycle. That's kind of the path that we're heading towards. And another way I describe is, for customers, you're partnering with Augment not because of like a specific IDE feature. You're partnering with us because you believe you have a code base that is like complex and messy, and your team is not getting the best out of the coding agents today. And when you partner with Augment, you have something in the VS Code, IntelliJ. We have an agent there. We have a CLI agent that can be used across your entire CI/CD pipelines and other use cases. We have a code review experience we actually launched last week for enterprise customers only. That's coming soon to self-serve. So it's a whole portfolio is how I think about it. In this vision, I think I'll touch on roadmap a little bit. We tend to think of this in kind of maybe 3 buckets. Bucket 1 is interactive software development in like basic, it's developers working with an agent interactively. What are some things we are doing there? A big focus recently has been reliability and speed, right? How do we make sure that the agent is super reliable? I think we are getting to a place where these agents are like they have to be part of everyday workflows, and they have to be super reliable. So that is a feature. So how do we make sure that you have the most reliable agent that you can rely on? The second one, this is a pattern that we've observed internally. There are some engineers on the team that are able to get like a lot out of the agent than others, right? So what is a product surface that maximize the chances of like folks that are non-power users can get the most out of the agents as if the power users are getting it. So that's an area that we are actively prototyping and exploring. And also quality of life improvements, right? I think there's folks are always asking features and how do we improve those things. So that's on the interactive side. In the outer loop, if I look at outside of the interactive software development, I'm pretty excited about the Augment automation platform. There's multiple tools in the toolbox, right? Like we recently launched a TypeScript SDK. So that allows you to programmatically invoke our CLI, right? That means you can build much more complex workflows with a lot of logic in place. So you're starting to build something that's repeatable and reliable, right? That's sort of the idea there. So there's a lot of emphasis on automation platform where what are the different tools in the toolkit that allows you to do that. And then we're also looking at potentially exposing remote agents as an API so that you can build remote agents. You can build your own Slack bot. So there's the interactive bucket, there's the outer loop automation bucket, and then finally teams. I think when we think about teams a lot, and I do think there's something about teams and working with teams that makes things today, like you're trying to get context from multiple different places, and like how do you get and work with the agent? So there's some prototypes that are happening there to see how do we make working with agents in teams better. So that's some prototypes that we're kicking the tires around.
That was excellent. That was very prescriptive and detailed. So appreciate that. Want to just tell people that they can ask questions. So please use our Q&A function. Very soon we'll open up for questions. So if you have anything to ask, Vinay, please do. One of the things that I saw as part of kind of my research into Augment Code, which has been fascinating as a product, is that there has been a recent pricing overhaul in how you operate as a product that may have upset some people. And so my question is, how do you justify the change? How do you look into that particular price change? Any lessons that you've taken as part of that structure, not only obviously from a product perspective, but from a company perspective, and lessons learned for the future?
Yeah, it's a great question because we sweated a lot of the details on this one because we knew it was going to be a big change. I think there's a thread that connects our conversation today, right? Like if you look at in the world of AI, things are changing very rapidly. So when we first launched agents, there was a lot of debate internally on should that be much more credits based, should that be more user message based, should that be outcome based, and we wanted to straddle this balance of like how do we make it easy for users to understand while making it so that it represents the costs on the cost side of the equation, right? Because to be a healthy business, you need to make sure that users are getting a lot of value, and you can provide that value at a margin that makes sense to run the business in a healthy way. Two things happened, I would say, when we launched the pricing around that user messaging, right? So our first pricing was you're just charged a flat amount per user message. So you send a prompt, and then the agent does a bunch of work, and then that's it. That's 1 unit of billing, right? There are many problems with that. I think on one end of the spectrum, even if you ask a simple question like, what does this method do, or help me understand this method, you are being charged the same. And then let's say a different prompt that did a lot more work. I think that's one. The second thing is, when I think about how do you align your incentives with outcomes for your users, right? Like one of the incentives that we wanted within the company is, hey, users can get more done with one prompt. So we for example, we added this prompt enhancer feature, which relies. It's one of the features that's most loved by our community of users, which is if you start with a simple prompt and use your prompt enhancer, it basically looks at your code base context and then enhances the prompt in a much more detailed way that is much better suited for an AI to do a lot of work.
A lot of work.
Right? Now, when we are implementing things like this, we actually want users to get more done by doing less in terms of user messages. So the agent started doing more and more work per one user message, right? And the pricing just didn't make sense.
Right.
So that's why we wanted to say, look, let's just map it to some multiple of what the model providers billing looks like. That way, I think we are incentivized to say, how do we continuously keep improving the product so that one user message goes a long way? I think that's the thing. In terms of messaging, I'm a big fan of just being very transparent. I think developer community is someone that, as an engineer, that's the group that I speak with all the time. And whenever you need to make a hard decision, the best thing to do is transparent. Now, it's not easy to say, but it's the right thing to do. And I think people understand. Like if you tell them, here is the lay of the land, here is why we're doing it, here is a rationale for it, I think folks are much more appreciative than otherwise.
Fully agree, and I appreciate that walkthrough of the thought process behind the pricing. It's never easy, right? Because these things are changing so quickly that pricing also has to adjust quickly. Cool. So as we get into more future, we touched on vision and how you see and how the product will take form. If we took a wider lens into the whole market and running the risk of being wrong, where do you think this is all headed? What do you think will happen? And I don't even like 5 years. I don't even know. Maybe we're all in the beach drinking while AI is coding away. But what do you think? Where is this all headed?
Yeah, I'm not going to try to predict an AGI timeline. I think I remember that was the most favorite question for a lot of the podcasts in 2025.
Yeah.
Here is maybe how I think about it. I think LLMs are great with language, right? And code is the best type of language. It has very precise rules, and you can learn much more rapidly by executing code. So when I think about how far LLMs have come in terms of being able to produce high quality code, we are at the very beginnings of it. I think there's a lot more innovation that's in front of us as there's more data, there's more understanding, more compute that we can throw at it. So in terms of where we're all headed, on the capability side, I think models are going to get more and more capable. That's one thing. I think about what does it mean for us as engineering teams and folks working in the space. The software development lifecycle as it stands today is going to look very different, right? I think that's one. How do you live on that edge to go experiment and try things, and then make sure that you're sort of creating that future? That's one. I think for software development teams, I think there's got to be a lot more outcome-oriented thinking that everybody needs to embrace, right? Before this, when the problems were few and a lot of the energy was being spent on getting the implementation right, you're sweating a lot of the implementation details, right? I think if you can get a lot of the implementation done quickly, a lot of then as software developers,
You unblock the next phases of thinking, right?
yeah, I think you'd have to pull up like one level higher and spend a lot more time on business impact, outcome oriented thinking, and then how do you set things up so that you can experiment more, or like you can ship things faster. I think that's kind of like the evolution that I see. Yeah.
I think that's a safe bet. And if we digest that as we think about software engineering as a job, do you think Augment Code is going to be a force to have more developers in the world or fewer developers in the world?
Yeah, even if you look at the name Augment, I think we've always believed in augmenting the software developer. I think that's truly where I personally believe that too. It's not that. If at all there is this future, I think we are very far away from a future where like AI is doing everything, right? I think the AI is going to be a very powerful tool, but with developers at the center of it, and us learning and figuring out like how to wield that tool in the best way. That's kind of how I see it.
Wonderful. Well, that's fascinating. Fascinating answers for some difficult questions. So I thank you, Vinay, for the transparency and honesty here. And I want to open up for discussion from the audience. So we already have a few questions here. Let's start with a question from Claudia, and she asks, "What does trust but verify look like in AI-heavy engineering process?"
Yeah, this is a really good question. I think this comes up a bunch, and we think about this too. In many ways, I think it helps with understanding where the responsibility lies, right? If we kind of touched on this earlier, if you sort of view AI as another developer, I think then you approach things a certain way. But if you look at AI as a tool for a developer, I think you approach things a little bit differently. I find that, at least for where we are right now, I think it's useful to say AI is still a tool. So whatever code that's being authored is something that a developer is taking ultimate accountability for. I think if you sort of start from there, then I think the trust but verify comes down to all the mechanisms that we have today. You can double down on that, right? Like, do you have the right test for it? Do you have the right functional test for it? Do you have the right end-to-end test? Do you have the right code review process in place? And it's not that all of those have to be all human oriented. I think it can be AI assisted as well, right? Like if you can leverage AI to write an end-to-end test that can test the whole functionality, fantastic, do that. AI in code review, it is incredible how insightful our experience has been, like with Augie code reviews as an example. Super valuable, right? So, and if you can verify things in layers, I think you're continuously increasing your chances of you're increasing your confidence interval by doing this in this particular way. That's how I think about it.
Claudia also asks, how can leaders measure whether AI is actually improving the engineer's workflow? I think it's a good question in regards to measuring the ROI of having these brilliant tools used by our teams.
I think there's two buckets here worth thinking about separately. There's the interactive software development bucket, which is as a developer, you're trying to get a task done and you're working with AI agent to try to get that done. And there's another bucket, which is you're automating some part of your software development lifecycle. Let's say it could be CI/CD test triage failures and things like that. In one of them, I think the ROI is much, much more straightforward, right? Like you can say, if we have a customer that we're working with, they're a pretty big company. They have a lot of engineers spending time triaging test failures. A very clear ROI is how much time are the engineers spending time in test failures today, and how many tests are they able to cover, and what signal are they getting from those tests. And with AI agents that deeply understand your code base in the mix, how does the equation change? And ultimately, the outcome there is you're able to ship code faster, right? So that is a very clear way to measure ROI. In the interactive software development, though, I think it's, understanding developer productivity in interactive software development has been an area of study, and I don't think it's solved. Here is what I do. I think I find that valuable. I mean, you can look at the typical metrics like cycle time and things like that, and then see how AI is helping versus not. The other thing I find incredibly valuable is just talking to your teams, right? Like, talk to folks on the team, and you should have enough trust that they feel. I think something you have to be a little bit mindful, I would say, if you, as an eng leader, if you're top down saying you must use AI tools, and then you go ask them how are they using it, they might feel pressure to say, oh yeah, I'm using it, I'm finding it valuable, right? Instead, if you say, look, we are providing these tools to you so that you can be more productive. Now, I want to understand how it's helping you versus not. I think you'll truly understand on the ground reality of what's holding them back versus where they're getting accelerated outcomes, right? So almost embracing the role of a researcher. If you're an eng leader or an eng manager, I would say see yourself as a researcher and then go, work with your teams, talk to your teams to understand on the ground how it's helping or not, and then change your course, right? Like, if your team is struggling in some part for some reason, brainstorm with them. What's going on? Is there a different tool available out there? And then you can adapt from that dimension.
I think many companies are trying to get this fire kickstarted, the idea of having AI increase performance and throughput of software. So Mark R asks a good question. How do we get early adopters to influence the rest of the team? Maybe that's like, how do we get early adopters to start using these tools, and then how do we get them to influence the rest of the team?
There's what's the analogy? I guess in the early 1900s, they would, before internet and all that, I think folks would travel to distant parts of the world and then come back and tell stories to get people excited about wanting to go there, right? I think there's a very similar parallel here, I would say. Two things. I think bottom up, just talking about it, and then just share what are some of the things that you're finding success in. If you're an eng leader or an eng manager, creating spaces and encouraging people to share what's working for them and what's not working for them, I think it's a great way to, so creating space for conversation is how I would describe it, is a great way to encourage people to learn from each other. I think that's one. And as an eng leader, the second thing is to just create space for failure, I think is really another one, right? Don't, just because, let's say, somebody chose a tool, don't hold them accountable saying, oh, you chose the tool, and what do you mean it's not working out for you? It's like, no, we are in the world of where things are changing rapidly. If you picked a tool, it's not working for you for some reason, great, throw it away, try something else. I think so, creating that safety net for folks so that they can do more experimentation are the two things I think that come to mind for me.
Love it. With AI writing more and more code, I often hear folks talking about the burden that is now code review, which is also being inserted there. AI is also being inserted in that process. And so Mark R asks also a good question here, which is, what is the future of code review? Code review obviously meant for us to be double checking, triple checking work, but also sharing knowledge between amongst the team of what's being done, decisions made in code. And now, super important code review to make sure that every single AI generated code and decisions being made are also part of the knowledge of the team. So what do you think will happen in terms of code review?
Yeah, I think there's an element of, you mentioned code review is not just about getting the code quality right. I think there's a lot of social aspects of disseminating best practices and knowledge. I mentioned we just launched an Augment Code review, and internally we've been testing it. And I was somewhat of a skeptic initially, but then two things I started observing. I think the kind of things that AI is able to pick up on in code reviews is typically comes from someone that is spending a lot of thinking cycles trying to do code reviews, right? Like code reviews, there's multiple types of code reviews. Like there are some where people are spending a lot of mental cycles to give a very high quality code review. There's another code review that just looks at the general flow and then says, you're good to go. The Going back to your question about, what do we believe at Augment? Is AI going to replace humans or it's going to assist them? I think the way we think about this is, what are some things that AI can be really good at, and let AI do that? And what are some things that as a human we would have to be doing to augment that, right? Is sort of how I think about it. So in code review, what we have observed is it's better to build an agent that optimizes for high signal and low noise. And that's an explicit choice that we have taken, right? At our Augment Code review, our acceptance rate is north of 60%. So 60% of the suggestions, more than 60% of the suggestions that are provided by us, and some of our customers are seeing 75 to 80% in their code bases. So that is a very, very high bar, right? Like
Very high.
now, so what that means is you're finding all the things that are most critical that a human would have otherwise had to spend a lot of thinking cycles. Now the human can focus on the general framing of it. Are we going in the right direction? And understanding like how the code base is evolving is sort of how I see it. I think Mark also talks about rules. I think the thing that we prioritized is, out of the box, how do we make sure that the code review is valuable? But you can get more out of the code review by having a human describe the rules in a way that the AI can be much more effective in what it's suggesting, right? So it's sort of in layers, I would say. And that in combination with folks on the team getting a shared understanding of how the code base is evolving, I think that's kind of how I see them play hand in hand together.
Okay. Yeah, and Claudia, I think it has a follow-up on that. So we go from code review to intent review.
Yeah, I think intent review and also shared understanding is probably how I would see it, right? Because I think as things are moving very rapidly, I think there's value in sort of trying to trying to keep up with like how the code base is evolving together, I would say.
Very cool. Okay, well, this has been a phenomenal conversation, and I've learned a ton. So I'm thankful for your time. I think it will be very cool to now look at some of the results of our poll. We've launched 2 polls. So, which statement best describes your experience with large scale code bases? And that's pretty split. So there's people that actually have not worked on one, people that touched one occasionally, and people that work regularly on them, which is interesting. And then the following question is, when you have to work in a large and messy code base, what's the feeling? And it's just part of the job, seems to be the most replied answer. So yeah, I think there's tons of opportunities, especially from conversation we've been having with many of our customers at Codacy, for Augment to be very impactful. So I salute all the efforts that you guys are doing, and I wish you tremendous success on this. So cool, Vinay, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for accepting the challenge to talk more about the behind the scenes of building Augment Code. And thanks everyone for joining us today. We went behind the scenes. We've seen a lot of very insightful details about building one of the top, most influential products out there to build software in the new generation of AI coding tools. And I hope you had as much fun as I had knowing more about the behind the scenes of Augment Code. As always, Codacy is an end-to-end solution for building products securely. We have solutions such as Codacy Guardrails that helps you build with coding agents, not losing any safety or security. And join us next time as we continue exploring AI giants and how they are changing the world. Have a great rest of your week. Thanks, Vinay, for joining, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for listening.